So let's get into the topic of canning what you grow, Holly. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, Holly is a multi-award winning Wisconsin State Fair canner, and she has taken a number of courses through the rec department in the Milwaukee County, I guess Milwaukee County,
the Milwaukee Rec Department.
Rec Department, that's it. So she knew nothing about canning before we got together. She didn't grow up with it. So she's learned a lot, and she teaches some basic of canning classes, throughout the southeast Wisconsin area when that is allowed to do. So we're going to talk about canning what you grow, Holly.
Right. So canning is one thing that is really important to know is that canning is a science. So this simply means that you need to follow the directions.
If you don't have product ingredient A, you can't substitute ingredient B for that, like you would do it.
We're going to get to that.
Like you would do a cake. Yeah, that's the science of it.
So that means that it's important to realize this because you're taking a perishable item, you're putting it into a jar to make it basically a non-perishable item to make it shelf stable. So following the directions, realizing it's a science, there's a balance there, is important. So you want to can safely. And one way you can safely is you follow the recipe and you make sure you have the ingredients for the recipe beforehand.
And when we do talks, people get agitated at you because they're like, but I can this way, and you keep saying, that's not the safe way to can. But I can this way, can't I? And you keep saying.
And I say, no, you cannot. I say, I'm teaching safe canning.
But I can still can the stuff.
But they want some sort of validation.
Right.
And I won't give it to them. And that's frustrating. So that's what's important. Now you also have to think about how you have the ingredients on hand. So if it says use bottled lemon juice, it doesn't mean, oh, I'm out of bottled lemon juice. I got this old lemon sitting in the fridge. I can just use that. No. So bottled lemon juice and certain vinegars and things have an acidity that's consistent. So it's usually 5%.
Consistent means safe.
Yeah, safe. But it means that like bottled lemon juice, it has a 5% acidity. You don't know that with your wayward lemon in the back of your fridge. So you want to keep that in mind. You want to use the ingredients that it says. So like, for example, if it says to add cinnamon, it doesn't mean to add some cinnamon sugar blend that you have that may have some sort of emulsifier or...
What is an emulsifier for those who are not...
It's like a thickener.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Or something that you're not sure. Like if you're making a chili starter mix and it says add chili powder, cumin, garlic powder, onion, doesn't mean you need to throw in your packet of chili spice because that chili spice could have some sort of food additive in it.
You want the raw ingredient.
Yeah, whole ingredient. So then you have to think about how do you can it? Is this a hot water bath? Is this a pressure canning? How do I can it? Maybe I don't have what I need. Maybe I just need to freeze it instead. You want to think about that.
Well, also, there's things in which we have canned, example being bush beans. We used to do it by the water bath method. That was when I was growing up. Now they have changed that it's not safe to do in the water bath. You have to pressure can it. We've tried that. We didn't like the texture or the flavor of them, so we strictly blanch and freeze those green beans. We don't can green beans.
No,
and that's our preference.
Right. We prefer them to be more
crispy. Snappy. Yeah.
So you want to keep that in mind. How do I can this? Water bath canning or pressure canning? So water bath canning is for high acid fruits or vegetables or something like jams, marmalades, chutneys, or if you take those fruit and vegetables and you add the addition of acid or sugar. So for example, for carrots, okay? You can can pickled carrots, but you cannot in a hot water bath, but you cannot can carrots in a hot water bath. The carrots themselves would have to be canned in a pressure canner. Because
of that liquid or that ingredient that you're using either allows it to be pickled because of that vinegar or because it's a low acid, it can't be safely pressure can or safely
like
water bath. Brine, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Same thing.
And that's a lot of, you can do a lot of different brines that it's safe in the water bath, but without that brine, it is simply unsafe to preserve unless you're pressure canning it at the proper duration of time.
Right. Even something like peaches, pears, fruit, whatever, you're adding some sort of sugar, whether it be its own juice, a juice, or some sort of syrup. You don't have to can stuff in a heavy syrup. You can do a light syrup or juice. And also, so aside from that kind of high acid or acid additional is tomatoes. And tomatoes, you do want to add some lemon juice or vinegar when you're canning those, whether sometimes the recipe like pasta sauce calls for vinegar, lemon juice. Sometimes if you're canning whole tomatoes, it calls for lemon juice. So you have to think about that as well.
And then you just don't want to use a recipe from Aunt Jeannie's cookbook.
Well, yeah, we're getting there.
Okay.
Okay, so then pressure canning
let's talk about pressure canning before we find sources here.
For the low acid food. So that includes things like root crops, squash, pumpkin, help me out here, green beans, carrots,
Potatoes.
Yeah. Peas, anything like that. Anything that is like just a vegetable, you want to pressure can, or if you're canning meat, anything like that, you want to use the pressure canner. It's going to get the temperature to where it needs to be.
And it also determines your altitude that you're at. That's a critical part of the time allotted for that pressure canning. Now, does the altitude also affect the water bath canning time, or is it just the pressure canning recipes?
Both.
Okay.
You want to be aware of your altitude. And most books and guides will say, like, if you're this altitude, this is what you need.
Add X amount of time or whatever to that time.
Right. So you have to keep that in mind. Like we are at like sea level basically, so we're different.
In that frame.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's people who are, you people that are in the mountains or whatever are above sea level quite a bit. So that's one thing to definitely keep in mind. And then here's some good resources is Ball Canning. If you're familiar, that's a very good resource. Better Homes and Gardens, your university extension, and the National Center for Home Food Preservation.
You just do not, as I brought up earlier, you just do not want to find Aunt Jeannie's recipe book and go, oh, well, she did this in 1947. I'll just follow the same recipe. And that doesn't work.
No, you want something within the last 10 years or so.
And there are certified master canners. There's not a lot of them because they don't depend on the state, isn't it? How that works?
Right. So they're certified master canners. I know in Wisconsin they only want so many per state or whatever region. But yeah, those people exist, and you can definitely reach out to them. Sometimes
you would call your local extension office, wouldn't you? And then that would be a good starting point to find that source.
Yes, that's correct. And then sometimes organic food stores have canning classes. It just depends. And our canning talk is mostly about the basics of canning. We don't do any canning.
No, it's here's the tools that you need. Here's the basics of what you can and can't and how. And we kind of do a dry run of the procedures. Mm-hmm. But when you get into that whole, we're going to can tomatoes, there's a lot of things that...
It's not something we feel comfortable doing in 45 minutes.
Right.
So, and that's another thing is you definitely want to make sure why you want to read the recipe, because it might take you a little bit longer than you realize.
Well, let's talk about, before we wrap this up, canning, removing the rings when you store your canned goods. A lot of people don't do this. And also a lot of people, when they can, I wouldn't say a lot, but you see this on social media, they flip the jars upside down for them to cool. So two things that are not necessarily good here.
Right. So, for one, when you pull your jars out of the canner, don't flip them upside down. You just want to pull them out of the canner and set them on a towel, like a dish towel or a cooling rack, whatever. You don't want to put them directly on the table or counter. And then you also want to just, after they're done sealing, when you hear those pops from the seal that occurs.
Pings.
The pings. You want to remove the rings, and you want to remove the rings when you put them in storage, because if you leave that ring on, one, you can reuse that ring for other canning as you continue to can. And two, if you leave that ring on, say there's some sort of weird, reaction in the jar.
We've had about a dozen of them over the years that have popped in storage.
You want the lid to pop off. You don't want it. And if you have the ring on, it might reseal itself, or it might pop the jar open.
Explode the jar.
Yeah.
So always, whenever in doubt, throw it out. There's three things that we do when we open a new jar of anything that we've canned. We visually inspect it. We look at it. Then we smell it because that's your second defense. And then if those two check out, it looks good and it smells good. Then we taste it. And then if it tastes off, we don't go, well, we're going to eat the peaches anyway.
Right. And that's the thing to keep in mind is that this is why you want to can safely. Even if it doesn't smell, there could be something going on. Now, not saying that if you don't can safely, this is why you don't want to take shortcuts. You want to can safely to kind of safeguard yourself.
So there's some things to keep in mind. If you've got questions about your canning regimen or questions about canning in general, you can certainly send us an email at gardentalkradio@gmail.com.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.